Hello and welcome to the Unbreakable Me podcast. My name is Kyle Zagrodzky. I'm the founder and CEO of OsteoStrong. And we're really excited today because we're going to be having joining us shortly Dr. Laura Kelly. Now, it is important to note that the mission of OsteoStrong and the mission of the Unbreakable Me podcast is to really consolidate the skills of who we have identified as masters to help you lead the unbreakable lifestyle. And what does that mean? That means that we find people who are professionals or masters at specific areas of life that we believe needs to be managed in a way that you can live life to the fullest. That could be physical, emotional, relational, and in business. Now, initially, we're doing many of these podcasts as they relate to health. And certainly, we are in a time and a season where these are things that everybody is focused on. Now, Dr. Laura Kelly is whom one of these people I would identify as indeed a master. She is has a degree in Chinese medicine and is certified to practice in California and in the nation. And so we're excited to have her because I think that the philosophical differences between Chinese medicine and Western medicine are quite different. In fact, people may ask, well, what's better, Chinese medicine or Western medicine? And I think the answer is both, depending upon which philosophical approach you're looking at. So if we look at, for instance, Western medicine, Western medicine specializes in helping people once they have a problem, heart disease, diabetes, cancer, these kinds of things. And I don't think many people can argue that Western medicine isn't really at the cutting edge of what I would call pulling people out of the river. Now, the philosophical approach, and I'm going to introduce Dr. Laura here, Dr. Laura Kelly, in just a moment. But the philosophical approach to Chinese medicine, and she could correct me if I'm wrong, is that they focus more on preventative health. And they're going to do things, and she's going to teach you things today and explain in much more detail than I ever could, because she's the master, on how people actually can do things proactively to prevent many of the problems that we see here in our society. And I live in the United States, so things that we see going on here with things like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, osteoporosis, this kind of thing could be mitigated and reduced tremendously. And so welcome with me, everybody, Dr. Laura Kelly. Welcome to the program. Thank you so much for coming on. But let's go ahead and jump into this. Tell us a little bit about your background and your journey of how you got into Chinese medicine and what attracted you to that as a self-care method of teaching people and helping people along.
Yeah, I started off, my brother's a surgeon, my uncle's a surgeon, and started off in a Western medical type of family. We never had any alternative treatments in my experience. And when I realized what I really wanted to do was, study medicine, which I've wanted to do since I was a kid. I took a roundabout path to it. I started in pre-med, started in Western, but I wasn't really feeling that this is how I wanted to do medicine. I just didn't know there were other ways to do it. And as I progressed, I really wanted another way into the body. I wanted another philosophical approach to health. I looked around, and I'm quite scientific and require a lot of information to make my decisions and about medicine. So Chinese medicine is extremely well documented. Some of the writings, the real serious writings go back about 5,000 years. And although there aren't, double-blind, gold, placebo standard trials for all of this for the 5,000 years, there's incredible case reporting throughout the history of Chinese medicine, because this was the medical paradigm, and this is what I think people don't consider. This was the medical paradigm for an extremely successful civilization. Extremely successful. There was their dynasties, their years, thousands of years of wealth and literature and etc., just like our successful civilization. And so they developed a medicine in their civilization, and that's Chinese medicine. So I decided to study this because it has a philosophy, which is a holistic philosophy. And it looks at the entire system and says, if something is wrong, it's never the case that this is only happening in one place. Influences and factors that are going to influence every other factor in the body. And if you really want to fix a problem, medically, you need to look holistically. You need, because unless it's just a broken bone, which is because you fell off your horse, unless it's that, you're going to have some, and any of the things that we're talking about, any chronic issues that you were mentioning before, all arise from systemic imbalance. They don't arise because there's one organ that's not working properly. So finding a way to treat the body as a holistic system was what I found. And so I dove in and spent 7 years studying and come out of that with a doctorate in Chinese medicine.
Fantastic. Now you are licensed. You're licensed to practice in California, but you also mentioned that you're licensed to practice in the United States now with your doctorate in Chinese medicine. Is that accurate?
That's right.
Okay, excellent.
There's a national license that you can practice with. It's an additional test. There's quite an extensive. It's just like any medical profession. There's pretty difficult board exams. So if you pass them both, then you can do licenses.
So tell me, what are some of the challenges that you're facing with your practice? Because Chinese medicine is not something that many of us are exposed to. I'm aware of the philosophical approach to it, but it's not really a thing that's gotten a lot of traction here in the United States yet, and that may be changing soon. What kind of challenges are you facing now?
Well, the biggest challenge I would say is the integration of the medicines, because in my experience, I've studied a lot of Western medicine, and there's no way to work as a medical professional in the world now unless you are fluent in both, in my opinion. Not if you that's not the case, but for me, I need to be fluent in both medicines. And the integration of the medicines is far and away the best effect for the patient, in my opinion, from years of experience and watching. The problem comes in the integration. If people are in the hospital, it's impossible to work as a Chinese medical professional in the hospital, even if what you do is going to significantly improve their situation. And to me, that's the most frustrating element of it, is actually knowing for sure that the integration is great and good and benefits everyone, including the other medical professionals, because it takes some of the pressure off of them. But it's just impossible because of the way that the system is structured. And I hope that there are shifts in that. In China currently, as people may know, since there's been a lot of reporting coming out of China on the medicine that's being used for the current virus, most of the hospitals, I think 87% of the hospitals in China, are integrated hospitals. So what you're getting there is you're getting traditional Chinese medical treatment, and you're also getting Western medical treatment, and they work together. And traditional Chinese medicine has changed quite a lot, obviously, over the years. It's not just we're going to take this herb and wander around in the country for a couple of months and see what it does to us. Chinese medical science, traditional Chinese medical science is big. And one of the things that happens is deep research on the herbs. And it's not just about looking at the herb itself, it's looking about the pieces of the herb. What are the constituents of the herb that are actually having the effects that we're seeing? And what does it mean when you combine those effects? And how do you get the best out of those processes? And for example, again, with the current situation here, there's quite a lot of research going into looking at the molecular docking of the virus. How does the virus itself dock onto our human cell? And what are the mechanisms? And this is how you build a vaccine. This is how you would build a successful vaccine, is you look at the docking mechanism and you interfere with the docking of the virus onto our cell, so it can't even affect us. And you can build a vaccine from a synthetic, like a Western medical drug, or you could build a vaccine if you could find it from a natural substance, because there are natural substances that will be doing this as well. So currently, Chinese traditional medical science is looking in laboratories and understanding the medicine from a technical point of view.
Interesting. So I was going to ask you, what is working for you now? And I think you kind of started to answer it a little bit, but what kind of success are you seeing, not only with acceptance with what you're doing, but of how you see that working really in your life and your approach to healing?
I mean, I'm very happy about how things are moving in terms of medicine, because what's happening is that people are coming to my office and saying, I was told I needed to take this drug and I would like to find an alternative. And that's not one or two people, that's most people. And I think that that's wonderful. I mean, there's a place, like as you started to say in the very beginning, there's a wonderful place for Western medicine, of course. And certainly in acute situations, certainly in many, many situations, but in trying to manage chronic conditions like osteoporosis and things like this, there can be either very complementary experiences of the two medicines, or they can be healed through, lifestyle, nutrition, and these sorts of things, and herbs and things, and more holistic types of medicines. So I'm seeing a shift in the public of people wanting to find answers that don't necessarily rely on pharmaceuticals. And
We're
I
seeing a
think
big
that's
shift
good.
at OsteoStrong as well. Yeah, we're seeing a big shift
Good
at
for
OsteoStrong as well. More and more people,
exactly.
they're not wanting a pharmaceutical approach, and I understand your frustrations too, because osteoporosis, for instance, is classified as a disease, and it's really just a deconditioning of bone. If you're getting weaker because you're not exercising, we don't call that a disease. Your bone is getting weaker because you're not creating the environment and the stimulus to be able to trigger the development of new bone. And when we look at that, and so we've got to be very careful in how we discuss what it is that we do, because obviously, because it's disease, and you're not a doctor, and even doctors can't say they can cure a disease. You could treat a disease, but even we're not doctors. I'm not, and most of our franchisees aren't. So we have to say, the study shows that subjects increase bone density after a certain amount of usage of OsteoStrong. So these kind of being very nondescript and exactly what the mechanism is and how it's working, to be careful not to be falling into the treating a disease category. So I get your frustrations. I'm not a doctor, and I don't see it nearly to the degree that you do, but I think there is starting to become a shift. More and more people are looking, what we call them worried well, are taking more of a proactive approach to their health. They don't want to take the pill. They know it's there for them. They understand how it works. They're doing the research, and they're wondering, what if there's something that could help me? And I think that is, we're starting to see a lot more. And so I would like to pivot and talk to you a little bit about tactically and specifically, really how you guide people through health, what it is that you do, and kind of what are some of the myths that you have to overcome with people. I know we overcome the myth of aging, right? You could have 80-year-olds that look,
Fully.
think, and they're amazing, right?
Yeah,
And then
absolutely.
and then you have somebody who's 55 and they're falling apart, right? And so aging is not a function of your number of years. It's a function of your energy, the sharpness of your mind, the way you feel and move about. And it is my prayers, my hope, my mission, my belief, and my passion that we see people living well into their 80s, 90s, and over 100 even, and living at that same level. And I know you share that passion.
Yeah, absolutely. There's, I mean, just to hit the nail on the head, that myth of aging. I mean, I heard it from my grandparents, and I heard it from my mother. I don't hear it from her anymore so much, as we've been working together. But that kind of acceptance that, okay, well, I feel this is happening, or I'm getting a chronic condition, and okay, well, that's just what happens when you age. And it just biologically and physiologically, that isn't necessarily true. In fact, it doesn't have to be true at all for a majority of people. You know, there are mechanisms, and all of the mechanisms in the body operate on certain principles, and those principles are nutrient principles, essentially. You don't build any tissue without all of your nutrients in play, and you don't repair any of your mechanisms that may be broken, like a bone building mechanism, without all of your nutrients in play. And there are two main reasons why you wouldn't have all nutrients in play. And one of them would be you're not consuming them, and the other one would be that your genetics are not transforming them properly into what your body needs. Because if you eat something, if you eat an orange, your body has to transform the nutrients that are in that. And there are multiple steps along the way of transformation for nutrients. For each nutrient has a different transformational pathway. And every transformation along that pathway is ruled by a gene. And we have, all of us have thousands or millions of what are called polymorphisms. They're not called mutations because they're not like we grow out of using our little toe. That would be a mutation over time as a species. These are smaller than that, and they're not quite as widespread, but they're the small differences that make our physiological bodies inside different. So how we process vitamin D is going to be very different. It's going to be much different for you probably than it is for me. And so these are the two reasons why, you know, you may be doing everything right, but you still may end up with sort of a chronic condition as you get older. But that's not because you're getting old. That's because over time you haven't been optimizing, or your body hasn't been optimizing those nutrient intakes. So once you understand that, you can then work with those mechanisms. So you can understand your genetics, so you can optimize your body's use of the nutrients that you're using. And you can understand where your weaknesses are also in terms of mechanism. And once you have those two pieces of understanding, you can use the nutrients and the substances to optimize the mechanism function. And, you know, this can be done at any age. This can be done when you're 100. You know, the sooner the better, I suppose. But
well, let me ask you a specific question about that. So, getting into what you do with your practice, because you pulled up something interesting there. So, I try to go get complete blood work every year, and there are things that I do to monitor my health. I'm 51 years old, and I want to have visibility. And I think a lot of people are just wanting visibility into where I'm at today, where am I deficient, and what can I do to affect that so I don't have a problem later on. So I guess I fall into the worried well category that I was talking about earlier. So tell me a little bit about what do you do in your practice to identify where people could be falling short in their ability to process certain nutrients, and then what do you do to help address that? Because I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that that is because that is a heart of a lot of diseases that we face, like with autoimmune disorders and things like that. And I would love to hear you speak about that in more detail.
Sure. I mean, you know, genetic science is a relatively new science, and it's a rapidly growing and expanding field, and this is a complex situation genetically. We have genetics, right, which is sort of your blueprint, but then we have epigenetics, and so epigenetics is on top of genetics, and what that is how your choices in your lifestyle and did you breathe in smog or whatever is going to influence the functioning of your genes, because genes are hard-coded. They can be on and they can be off. So that's all one part of the genetic response. But the other responses, as I was talking about, is the pathways, and which genes are in the pathways for which vitamin or nutrient, and then how do they relate to each other as a whole. And the science of genetics is currently working out all of this. The how they relate to each other as a whole is, who knows if we're ever going to be able to understand that. I'm sure we will, but it's not right now. But we are starting to gain enough information on which genes are responsible. For example, for vitamin D has to go through a number of transformations into different forms before it becomes 25-hydroxy and becomes the actual effective molecule for what we need it to be. There's 3 transformations that it has to do, and they're each, again, like I said, all gene genetic driven, and they're all different genes driving each different. And so what I do is really started the foundation, what I consider to be the foundation of medicine, which is how are our bodies using what we're putting into them? Because if we don't know that, we know we can put as whatever we want into them, but if our bodies aren't using them efficiently or at all, or if they're affected in any way, we're not going to know that, right? And because what happens, especially with something. Go ahead.
Well, what do you do to identify that? Like, since you've got somebody who doesn't absorb vitamin D3 properly, how do you identify it, and then what do you do to help?
Well, you can run genetic panels for nutrition. I have, I hadn't found one which was as comprehensive as I wanted, and so I built one. So I'm using that technology now in my practice. And what I'm doing is, I'll tell you exactly what I'm doing, and what works very well is running the nutritional genetics as much as we have in science currently, and then running a nutrition test, which is, a urine test. From the urine test, I can see what you're deficient in. From your genetic profiles of your nutritional pathways, I can see where you most likely are going to have a problem. Because again, the genetics aren't 100%. They can be on, they can be off. There's different states. So we don't know that from the test. We just know what the genes are. But then we can take those 2 pieces of information and put them together, because I can see that you're deficient in vitamin D. And then I can see that, okay, you have 3 different polymorphisms in the genetic pathways, which means part of the reason you're deficient statistically is very likely because of these mutations, these polymorphisms, these small mutations. And so that way I know that I'm not going to dose you, I'm not going to prescribe for you, because this is a prescription, right? It's just one you can do yourself. It's a prescription. I know that 5,000 is probably not going to be enough for you, because you're going to have to overcome the genetic deficiencies that you have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to prescribe 50,000 for you for 3 weeks or 2 months, and then we're going to retest it and see how you do. And if you come back with perfect genetics and your vitamin D is a little low, maybe you're only going to need 1,000 instead of 5,000, right? So this is what we're doing with the genetics. What I'm doing with the genetics is actually fine-tuning the dosages of nutrients to help your body use what you give it in most efficiently.
I think that's fascinating, and complete props and respect to you for taking it to the next level. As I sit here and I think about everybody listening, we don't all have a Laura within our grasp that we could go see you and say, okay, what do I need to do for me? So if you could help us understand, because I live in Nashville and you live on the West Coast, and so what do I do? What does everybody listening do who doesn't have access to you? Because I don't know how much vitamin D3 to take, or I know that, and I want you to talk more about the mushrooms here in a minute, because they're fascinating, and I think people could learn from it. So what could average people do, or I'd say average. I think we don't have access to, so I think that's most people. So
right.
what could we do? What could we do to improve our health and maximize our immune system and things like this? And that is the talk of the town right now.
Right. I am, this isn't the point of the talk. I am building this out as a tool because I can't see everybody, and I know how much everybody wants assistance, and we should know about our own bodies. We should be able to take care of them ourselves. So I am building this out as a tool, and people will be able to have access to it in a few months. So we can talk about that at the end if you want. But you know, the best thing that everybody can do now is really, especially given the situation, is shore up what you do have, right? And that means essentially your immune system. And you know, this is the other thing when we're talking about longevity. You can keep all of your muscles in great shape, and you can keep your skin in really great shape and all of that stuff. But if you don't keep your immune system in great shape, then you're gonna be weak fundamentally inside.
Mm.
And having a strong immune system is actually one of the keys to longevity. There are a number of
I
keys,
agree.
of course, but it's a big one.
I agree.
So
My grandmother, my grandmother died of upper respiratory infection, which turned into pneumonia and killed her. Otherwise, she was a healthy woman. Her mind was sharp, but it just eventually got to the point where she couldn't breathe, and it took her life. And I wondered, what could she have done for her immune system so that her body could have just dealt with that as opposed to grinding it down. So let's talk a little bit about that and what recommendations that people could do right now, and I want to know not just what you could do right now, but how long does it take for these things to have an effect? So is it something that builds up over months, or is it something that's almost immediate? Help us understand what you would recommend and its timeliness, I guess.
yeah, sure. So I'll just give you a quick overview of the immune system for people, just so when I talk about things, you know, sort of have an idea of what I mean. So, I mean, there's two parts of the immune system. The first one is called the innate immune system. That's to do with just basic defense. It's our skin, it's our gastrointestinal system, the tract, gastric juice. It's going to kill any invaders that get in there. And then there's another line of defense within that innate system, which are natural killer cells and macrophages, basically. There's a few others, but neutrophils. And what they do is they're sort of indiscriminate killers. So if a virus comes in or a bacteria comes in, they go, okay, that's not us, and we're going to go and try and get rid of it. And then there's another part of the immune system, which is called the adaptive immune system. And what that is that kicks in later time, a few days later sometimes, which is when there's an invader, there's a system activated where part of the immune system will grab a piece of the DNA from the invader, and it will put it on the outside of itself. And it tells everybody, this is the enemy right here. This is the genetic code of the enemy, or a piece of it, enough of it so that you'll recognize it. And then the body goes, okay, got it. And then they build a lot of little killer cells to go out and kill that piece of DNA. And so then they can go out and gobble up all of the things that have that DNA on it. And it takes time for the body to build the cells, to present that piece of DNA, and to get all the little killer cells functioning and built to recognize that. That takes some time. So that's the second, that's the adaptive immune system. And that's, again, it's adapting to the specific invader. So the way that the immune system signals itself, our body uses signaling molecules all the time, and the signaling molecules of the immune system are cytokines. And cytokines come in various types, generally speaking, two. And Th1 is the sort of cytokine signaling response, which is pro-inflammatory. And that's going to happen pretty fast. That's going to be the cell. Okay, let's say our cell gets invaded by a virus. The cell's going to release a signal, which is called interferon. And that's a cytokine, and that's going to tell the immune system, okay, guys, I'm in trouble. So then the Th2 cytokines are the more allergic cytokines, where it's not so grave a danger. There's a sort of continuous response. And there's also anti-inflammatory cytokines within that secondary response. So generally what happens is you get an invader, you get a Th1 inflammatory response, and then a little while later, you're going to get a more of a repressive anti-inflammatory cytokine response. And that's the general way that works. And it's really important to know about that, because when you're dealing with an illness, the cytokines and the inflammatory response is something that you want. Because what that's doing is it's getting the immune system activated, and it's going to get what you have there to work. So this whole discussion about, taking aspirin or Tylenol to try and repress a fever, the point of that discussion is that in the short term, you want that inflammation. It's just that when it becomes chronic, more and more inflammatory cytokine response, then you start to have tissue damage. Then you start to have sort of a negative feedback loop of the immune system. Then maybe you can develop an autoimmune response because it sort of gets out of control. So really trying to understand that, yes, you want this inflammatory response, but then you want to start to try and not have an inflammatory response. Or if you see in yourself that you're just continuing to have an inflammatory response, then you want to start to work on your immune system. And you want to say, how do I balance the cytokine response? And the way that you do that, the easiest way that you do that is with mushrooms. They are the single best source of immune system balance and regulation on the planet. And I don't think anybody would disagree with that knows about natural medicine. They interface directly with the immune system through what's called beta glucans, and they manage to do the impossible, which is promote cytokine response, both pro-inflammatory and less inflammatory. But even the ones, there are certain substances in mushrooms that will only promote an inflammatory cytokine response. Even then, somehow they manage to regulate the response in the immune system. So they manage to balance out an immune response in a way I've never seen before. So if you have an overtly active immune system, they will bring that down. If you have a less active immune system, less active than it needs to be, they will bring that up. Various mushrooms, different mushrooms stimulate different cell types in the immune system, but all of them seem to stimulate both the NK cells, which are the natural killer cells, and the macrophages. And like I was speaking about before, these are the part of the immune system that don't require recognition of the invader. They just go out and do it. So if you have a very strong natural killer cell and macrophage response, that's going to happen right away. Your body doesn't need a trigger for that. This body's going to go, okay, here's the problem. And if you have a lot of natural killer cells, and then your body's going to be able to just shut that down before it becomes a problem. And that's really the key right there, is raising your natural, having a really substantial level of natural killer cells so that whatever invades you doesn't even get past the first guard, which is that gate
right. Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question about that. So, I'd like to know if you could list off some of the mushrooms and their response. And B, how long does it take for these mushrooms to start having the effect that you're talking about? So, if we're in the throes of the infection right now, and so where do I go get these things? If I start taking them now, when can I start to expect that my body would be able to have these benefits?
Well, I mean, technically speaking, you're going to build up natural killer cells immediately, because that's what's going to happen, is that it's going to trigger your immune system. So you will get effect immediately. Whether it's going to be a sustained effect is not going to happen I don't know exactly from the science, but I would say it's probably about 3 weeks for you to have a really for your body to go, okay, all right, we're in the groove of this new high level of natural killer cell response. I'd say it's probably about 3 weeks. That said, personally, at the moment, what I'm doing is I cooked a whole bunch of mushrooms and I'm taking a big shot of thick mushroom juice 2 times a day at least. Sort of as, I want the moat around my body, the mushroom moat,
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that, using it as a preventive on a regular sort of lifestyle way is one thing, but using it as a preventive against a really powerful virus, I see nothing wrong with taking sort of large doses and actually just making that response happen much faster.
Which
And that's what I would.
mushrooms do you recommend?
Well, as you have smartly done, start with chaga. It's a really very powerful mushroom. It upregulates all cytokines and basically has hands in all parts of the immune system. That's a really fantastic mushroom. It's got to be cooked to release all of the factors. So if you have powder, which is generally what you can find, or chaga, sort of pieces of ground up mushroom, you can take it straight, but you're going to get 10 times the effect if you cook it first. And you have to cook it for a minimum of an hour. You can cook it up to 8 hours, and it'll continue to just be powerful.
So
So
it
that's
doesn't
one thing I
destroy the
recommend.
mushroom. So it doesn't destroy the
But
mushroom effectiveness by
no,
cooking it?
it doesn't. It doesn't.
Okay.
Um, it's there. Things can get. The things that get destroyed from cooking are generally volatile oils, and the benefits of the mushrooms are not in a volatile oil format. So I take that, cook that up, and then mix in other powdered mushrooms. A really great mushroom for overall immunity is reishi. It's a traditional Chinese herb. It's been used for longevity for thousands of years, well documented as effective. And one of the reasons why they were living so long is because their immune system could fight everything off. So reishi is a great one. We're targeting the lungs here, especially these days. So cordyceps is a mushroom which specifically works in the lung, the immune system, targeting the immune system in the lung. So cordyceps is an excellent addition these days. Turkey tail is another really powerful immune modulator. So to me, the ideal situation would be chaga and turkey tail with cordyceps. That's a really solid base of targeted immune stimulation for the current situation.
Outstanding. That was fantastic. A lot of my questions were around that, and you dug deep into them a little bit further than I was going to go, and I just let you talk. So you didn't say anything that
Okay.
I didn't think anybody would not want to hear. So help me understand what would be the next steps for somebody that wants to, like, where could they go get these? Where you wrote a great article that I loved, priming the primer on priming the immune system, that actually goes through all this. And I believe we're going to give you, everybody listening, links to these websites that you've got a couple different websites that I think are easy to read. They're to the point. And we'll put those links up there for everybody so you guys can get access to this information. Where can people go buy these recommendations for this kind of thing? Or was that available?
I think that Amazon carries it. I mean, I have particular brands that I really like. I don't know if you want me to mention them or not. I have no affiliation with any of them. I just find them to be good products. So should I?
Yeah, please
Should,
do.
but
Yeah, please do.
okay.
I
So I
mean,
mean, I really okay. Sun Potion makes great Sun Potion makes great products. They're very clean and very pure and very beautiful products. Their chaga is really excellent as well. And Host Defense is Paul Stamets. He's sort of the most famous man in the world who knows the most about mushrooms. And he has a company called Host Defense. And his products are absolutely, completely fantastic as well. You're getting a really good, pure product that way, and it's going to be effective. And it's not going to be processed. It's not going to have any, bad things in it. because the last thing you want to do is put something in your body that's really good for you and then put in a toxin with it. That's a terrible thing to do to your body. So those two are really great products. I mean, these days, I think Amazon is still mailing everything out. So I think you can do it at Amazon. I've seen them at Whole Foods, which is also Amazon. I would just look around for those two products because you're going to get good effect.
So my last question, thing that came to me a minute ago, as I think about, are there any contraindications or people that shouldn't be taking these kinds of things? If there's people who have, I guess they call them cytokine storms. I know that you said they have a balancing effect like that, but I know you know this answer, and I haven't heard this answer yet. So I'm asking you for everybody and for myself, who shouldn't be taking these mushrooms?
I think everybody should be taking them. I mean, kind of storm responses, generally speaking, if you're at that point, you're going to be taking a very powerful anti-inflammatory like a steroid or something like that. And you're probably not going to be cooking your chaga. But if you are in a position to do that, they are modulators. These are immune modulators. And to that end, my feeling about that is that they would modulate the cytokine response rather than push it higher. So
Okay.
I don't actually see any negatives. I don't see anybody that couldn't be taking them. I mean, I think if you were in the throes of a cytokine storm, I would want to take a steroid, right? That's what I would want. I would want really quick work to just dampen the whole response down. But
Yeah.
I don't think the mushroom would be contraindicated. I just think it's not the most appropriate response at that point. That's all.
So I've got a little trivia question for you that kind of came up. My son and I were talking about this. I've got 3 boys. One of them's 14 years old, and he was learning about viruses this year in biology class. And as he was going through and explaining to me how viruses work and all this kind of thing, he stopped and he says, "Dad, there's something I don't understand." I said, "What's that, son?" He says, "A virus isn't alive. So why is it when I'm watching the news with you about this whole virus thing and they say, the virus can survive for X period of time on a surface?" He goes, "What do you mean survive? It's dead already. And if it's dead already, how does it die on a surface? And what does that mean?" And I'm sitting looking at him going, "Man, that's a really good question. I have no idea." And so I wanted to spring that on you to see if A, if you had the answer, and B, you've done a great job at, I loved how you were explaining the immune system of how one set of cells will grab a piece of DNA and make it easily seen, and they'll go out and kill it. It was a beautiful explanation, and I call it the 4th grade explanation, which is I love that because it helps me understand, and then I won't forget, and I'll be able to explain it to other people. But if you could help me and anybody else watching, why is it this virus becomes ineffective or dies, so to speak, becomes the undead on a surface? What does that mean? Do you know the answer?
I do. I mean, I think that saying it's the undead is probably the right answer. Because again, I mean, as you say, they're not alive. There's no actual organic mechanism that's happening in there. It's not breathing, it's not eating, it's not doing anything. It's just a piece of DNA, or in this case, it's RNA, sitting inside of an envelope. And that envelope is the key to what you're talking about. The reason why a virus needs a host is because it needs to use our mechanisms to replicate itself. And all of the hosts that viruses use are wetware. I don't know how else to say it. Flesh, damp, wet, right? 70% water. So their environment is a wet environment in that regard. And they're able to function and move and exist in that environment. As soon as they're on a surface, they don't mean, when they're using the word dead or killed, that's not really the right word. There's a semantic issue there. What they mean is inactive. And what happens is that envelope generally requires some degree of dampness, of wetness to it. And when that dries out, that is no longer a viable infective virus anymore. So if it takes 3
That's
hours for the envelope to dry out, it stops being able to be transmissible. It won't infect you anymore.
fascinating. That's a great answer, and I understood it, so that's even better. So, a quick question: in when I hear about this virus, I've heard from one doctor I was speaking to this weekend, and he was saying that the coronavirus is actually a pretty weak virus in that he goes it dies quickly on surfaces and it's very susceptible to and he said quickly, and he qualified that by saying that it does not like temperature changes, and that's the thing. He says, 78 degrees kills this temperature, kills the virus. And so what he's saying by that, I think, is that the envelope that is making this RNA capable of getting into your body and being effective faster at degrees.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it doesn't have a very strong envelope. Is basically what that is. But it makes
There you go.
up for it in by highly more infectious than other SARS viruses or other viruses. So it makes up for the weak envelope, unfortunately.
Yeah, it does. We don't like this one. And and I think one of the things, I was talking about on an earlier podcast I had with Dr. O, and I said, it's not that this one is necessarily worse than a bad flu. And you correct me if I'm wrong, what's worse about this one is it's highly communicative. It's easy to catch this highly contagious disease, which means that, the flu kills a certain number of people every year. I think 50,000. I mean, it's a lot. But
the US.
it's the fact. Oh, yeah, in the U.S. So hundreds of thousands worldwide. So when you take into the fact that this one is maybe not is maybe as bad as a bad flu, but it's not a question of when or if we're going to come in contact with the virus. It's a question of when, and we have to learn how to be proactive with our health, our immune system, and there's so many things that we can do to be the maximum, the best version of ourselves. And I don't think it's very hard. So I love the mushroom concept.
Yeah, and that's the foundation also. I mean, like you mentioned in the beginning, and we could probably talk for another 7 hours about this, but there's multiple parts that have to be taken into consideration. Like you said, gut health. I mean, so much happens in your gut related to your immune system. So that if your gut is not healthy, or if your bacterial populations are low, which is happening to quite a significant amount of Americans, we don't have a lot of species anymore, and a higher amount of species is directly correlated to longevity. But you're also going to have decreased immune effect because your gut influences your immune system so directly. There's a relationship also between your gut and your brain. The gut-brain axis is now being called in science, through the vagus nerve, which is a cranial nerve that runs all the way down into your gut. And there's communication that happens between the bacteria that are there and your brain. So all of this regulation is all going to go into affecting your immune response. So gut health is hugely important. There's another piece, quickly, which is called autophagy and mTOR. I don't know if we talked about this, but this is a mechanism that's highly important in the body in terms of longevity and actually in immunity as well, because autophagy and mTOR quickly are a generative and house cleaning mechanism that work on sort of a yin-yang axis. You can't be in both at the same time. And autophagy cleans out what are called senescent cells. And these are cells that are not dead. They're part of your body. Because your cells turn over, like your bones turn over. The cells turn over. So the cells get turned over. The old ones are not dead, but they're sort of pushed to the side. The immune system is responsible for coming in and clearing them out. If your immune system is slightly impaired, the senescent cells will sit there, send out dangerous cytokine signals, and damage the tissue around them. So the autophagy mechanism, the house cleaning mechanism, is also key to making sure that you're not damaging your tissues and keeping your immune system it keeps your immune system regulated, but your immune system also regulates those senescent cells. So there's this really interesting relationship there. And that mechanism is very important for avoiding chronic disease as well. So the whole other
Yeah,
things to talk about.
I'm a fan of autophagy, and so there was a little image that I carry around in my phone that really it's simply, and I know everybody's different, but what this image does is it tells you what stages your body's going through a fast. And so a couple of years ago,
Oh,
I implemented intermittent fasting, and I'll share with you, and I'll probably post it to our group here in a little bit. I'm not going to show it here. I don't want to futz around with my phone, but it just shows you, the first 4 hours of fast, and the next 4 hours, and it shows you, and then it's about I can't remember when exactly it starts, but it's around 12 hours. You start autophagy, and so your body has to be without food for a period of time, and then when you get to 36 hours, or I think it starts at around 24 hours. Actually, that's when autophagy starts. Without food for 24 hours for the process to really get going. Though I'd imagine it's going on to some degree all the time because you'd be dead otherwise. But it really kicks in at 24 hours. And then at 36 hours, it goes up to 300%. And then I learned at about 48 hours, your immune system goes through a complete reset. And so I try to, about once a week, do a 48-hour fast. Now, is there any other way to inspire autophagy without fasting? Though there's so many health benefits to fasting, it's ridiculous. They just go on and on.
yeah. I mean, that is the best way. You can upregulate. I mean, one of the things that's happening is you're upregulating sirtuins with that, and you can do that with nutrients. There are targeted, specific targeted nutrients that you can upregulate. Nothing is going to replace a fast. I mean, that is easily and by far the best thing you can do for everything. One of the things that happens in that autophagy process is that, and this has been shown, is that if you have an autoimmune condition, for example, you're having an impaired immune response. Part of your immune system isn't working properly. And what happens in autophagy is that a large portion of those immune cells, and then when you refeed, it gets built again. So your immune system gets rebuilt in a healthy way. So autophagy can really affect the immune system in that way as well. And I think it's 1 in 20, I think was the number. I don't remember exactly. Of these cases who did fast had in a massively improved autoimmune response from the autophagy process. So that's a great tool.
Yeah, it's great. It's easy. And people, I remember the first time I did a 24-hour fast, I was scared. And I was scared. And this actually relates back to our gut bacteria conversation, because when you have bad bacteria living in your gut, then it's sending out signals. Your mitochondrial sending out signals. It's telling you to get hungry, and that's where that term "hangry" comes from. I'm so hungry, I'm angry, and it's because your mitochondrial and your bad gut bacteria are sending a signal to your brain, telling you to eat food. And when you've corrected that bad bacteria, when you've strengthened your mitochondrials through various methods, that like right now, I could 24-hour fast is like absolutely nothing. I even 20 hours in the fast, I'm barely starting to think about food now. And I couldn't have imagined that years ago when I never fasted. I remember the first time I was like, oh my gosh, all right, what am I going to feel like? Am I going to get mad at people? Am I going to be snipped? Well, I was the first time I did it. And then I did it, started doing like 3 or 4 days in a row. I felt unbelievably amazing. I'll never live my life without intermittent fasting again. I eat like 1 meal a day. It's all within like a 3-hour period.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that actually brings us back nicely to the concept that we are extremely adaptive organisms, humans, extremely adaptive. And that really enables us to, again, at any age, like adapt to health, really, is a really good concept, like adapt to being healthy. Yeah. And we can do that because our bodies respond so well. So
Oh, and then it's wanting to do that. I do want to say one last thing, and then I know we're over the hour, but we did get started a little bit late due to my technical difficulties, unfortunately. But as it relates to gut bacteria, and correct me if I'm wrong, but so you know, people say, well, you've got good bacteria and bad bacteria, and one of the things that feeds the bad bacteria that's causing signals into your brain to tell you to eat more bad food is sugar, fried food, artificial sweeteners, these kind of things allow the bad bacteria to proliferate in your gut and make you more hungry, craving more of the bad stuff. Is that an accurate description as you understand it?
So you're saying the bad bacteria are telling you to eat bad things?
Well, now I could be wrong, and that's why I'm asking for clarification.
No,
Two
I
there's
wouldn't
two parts to
say
that
that
question.
that would,
One,
that's what,
what feeds the bad bacteria, and then why is it bad? I guess is the correct question.
well, generally speaking, except for in some cases, quite a lot of the bad bacteria are simply imbalanced bacteria. We have quite a lot, E. coli, for example, or H. pylori, these kinds of things that cause problems, but it's only when they get out of balance that they cause problems. Fungus, candida, this kind of thing. We all carry all of these things in our gut, and in some cases, like H. pylori, there are positive effects from them. There's quite a lot of, I think there's some research on a much lowered asthma states when you actually have this. It's only when it gets out of control that it starts causing stomach ulcers. So the bad and the good is not, in quite a lot of these cases, not the correct application. It's more about the population itself of that particular bacteria getting too large. And that happens when you have when you have an imbalanced gut population to begin with. Again, I said, as Americans are, the diversity of species that we have has dropped considerably. And I don't know if this is from, not eating a varied diet or antibiotics in the, in the water or in the food supply. But we have diminished species. And as we diminish our species, then there's less species to control things. And so some of these bad actors can become, because there can be more of them. And then you start to have a problem. And that's more of the condition, that's more of what's actually going on, rather than suddenly we have 3 or 4, bad actors that we ate somewhere. If they're bad actors that we ate on food, we're going to end up with food poisoning. So it's much more about the balances that are being kept in the gut.
Okay, I've got one more question, then I'm going to let you go. For now, I may have you come back on again later. My, I really enjoyed talking to you, and I'm hoping others have as well. My question is, what you gave us a couple of product recommendations for regarding the mushrooms. You said Sun Potion and Host Defense for great sources for these mushrooms we've been talking about. But and when we're talking about probiotics, one of the things that I understand about taking probiotics is that your stomach acid can destroy them. So you need to take them with something that alkalizes your stomach, or that they've got properties in them that allow them to pass through your stomach acid. Do you have a recommendation for probiotic proteins that you could share with us? Or probiotics proteins, sorry.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's okay. So I mean, there are a number of them that are encapsulated or double or triple encapsulated, and that tends to be a good thing to do. There's also one that I like, and again, I'm not affiliated with any companies, but there's one called Dr. Ohira's, which is a Japanese probiotic, and what's happening with probiotics is that all our guts are really different, and there's no rhyme or reason it doesn't look like to who has what bacteria and why. So quite a lot of the bacterial products that are out there, probiotics that are out there, are companies deciding, okay, we're going to take these 6 strains and we're going to put them in, and we're going to we decide that that's the best answer. Dr. Ohhira's is made differently. It's made in the way that your gut would work, and that it's a bunch of vegetables that he puts into a vat and he ferments, and those are the bacteria that you get, and that's what he puts in this really thick capsule. And so some people respond badly to some probiotics. Some people, you never know, because this is a personalized environment, just like the genes are a personalized environment. And randomly throwing probiotics at it can be fine or it cannot. But if you're sticking with a product that actually builds the way your gut builds, then I've never had a problem with anyone with that particular probiotic. So it's sort of like I call it a starter probiotic. It's Dr.
How do you start? How do you
Ohhira.
spell?
Doctor,
Do you know how
and
to
then
spell that?
DR.
Ohiro. DRO.
Ohirra, I think. So it's a really good base probiotic. It's a good starter.
Okay. You've been such a good sport, letting me go long, dealing with my technical challenges. So I really appreciate you being on. I've learned from it even more than our previous discussions, and so I hope it's been valuable to me personally, and I hope that it's valuable to everybody as we each strive to learn and adapt principles that hopefully lead us to what we call the unbreakable life. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Laura Kelly, for your time. And we love you all. We wish you to be safe and healthy during these difficult times. Be well, everybody.